morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
As part of our series on untold stories, Patricia Locke Foundation would like to ask you a few questions about Chief Little Crow, that we take it that you are one of the direct descendants of Little Crow. So we would like to continue our series on untold stories for the purpose of meeting the mission of Patricia Locke Foundation, which is the primary mission is to educate children and youth. So my first question to you is, who is Little Crow and how are you related to him?
Little Crow is also known as Ta'oyate Duta. Ta'oyate Duta means, in English, means his red nation. So this word Duta is the aspect of red which is associated with God, or Wakantanka. It's God's color. So when you say Ta'oyate Duta, means his relationship to his nation, which is a holy pact or holy covenant that he has with that nation. And the Dakota people or Dakota nation, Ta'oyate Duta or Little Crow, all his life stood up to defend the nation and the homelands. And the homelands are now in what is now currently known as Minnesota, or we say Minnesota. And if you look at a map of southern Minnesota, you see all of the place names. It's laden with place names. And just to look at a map, you can see just around the Minneapolis area, you can see, and I can't really bring myself to say them the way Euro-American immigrant population says these words, but maybe if I say them, people will figure it out. Like, I'll say Anunka, Shahasa, Miniwaka, Bedota, Waziata, Shakbe, Owotana, Winuna, Wakuta, Matobade, and the list goes on and on. And these are the original place names of the Dakota homeland that Ta'oyate Duta grew up in and dedicated his life to defending. And primarily, it's not, in a way, it's the land itself, but it's the people who have this relationship, the Dakota people. So the Dakota and the Lakota are the inheritors of a heavenly legacy. And that legacy was the holy woman who came and brought the spiritual laws. It's the golden rule. It's the same laws that all people have. And so when she bestowed these gifts or these laws, these heavenly laws to the people, some say she also gave the name Dakota, which means people who received and hold on to the covenant, the people who believe in prayer. And so this is primarily what Ta'oyate Duta had dedicated his life, pledged his life to uphold this. And it was in this line of duty that he ended up meeting his untimely death.
How are you related directly to him?
Ta'oyate Duta he had several wives, and one of his wives was named Miniata Ojanjawi, which means the light over the water woman. So if you see like maybe a sunrise or a moonrise or sunset or moonset, you see just as the sun comes up, there's the trail of light over the water, and that's what her name refers to. And she had children, and one of them was named Makaokia or Makokia. And here's a photograph of Makokia here with my mother. That was his granddaughter, Patricia Locke or Kawachi Washtewi. And He also had another son whose name was John Little Crow. And these two brothers settled on the Standing Rock Reservation. And Makokia married there in Wakpala. And he, as his father, were all members of the Bede Wakantoa band, or the Spirit Lake band of the Dakota, also known as the Santi or Isanti division, who have a distinct dialect of the Dakota language.
So Little Crow is your great-great-grandfather then?
That's correct.
So what are some of the accomplishments of Little Crow in terms of service to his peoples? Can you give us some examples?
Well, he was a great advocate of the rights of his people, and he negotiated the treaty of the Traverse de Sioux Treaty in 1851, and also another treaty. And he also advocated for the just treatment, because the people during that treaty of 1851, the Dakota people's lands were severely reduced and restricted to just a narrow band along land along the Minnesota River, and so this really curtailed their ability to be to provide for self-subsistence, to provide enough sustenance for themselves. And so there was a period of drought in which the people were starving, but then the agent at the time did not deliver any of the annuities that were promised, because he said that all the funds were being allocated elsewhere. And this agent told the people, and of course, Kaoyate Duta said that the people were starving, and the Indian agent said, well, that's too bad. You can go out and eat grass. Just go eat grass.
This is the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs agent?
Well, then it was under the Department of War Department.
Okay.
And so he was an agent at that time. I think his name was Galbraith, and he or Merrick. He told him, just eat grass. You can eat grass instead of annuities. And so this is what the people were faced with, was starvation at the time. And so then there was a lot of mistreatment, and so the people were eventually backed into a corner, and there was an altercation which ended up as a kind of like a explosion or conflagration that ended up in this protracted war. And Little Crow, of course, the results of that war was the largest mass hanging in U.S. history. The 38 that were hung in Mankato or Mankato, Minnesota. And
okay,
then,
just tell us a little bit about that. So that is the largest hanging conducted by the U.S. government ever
Yeah.
on their land to this day?
yes, that's correct. Yeah, the largest mass hanging ever done on U.S. territory. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in the world, I'm not sure. But it was done in Mankato or Mankato. Mankato means blue earth. There's a river there in which the people were able to get a blue clay substance that was used as a dye or coloring. But in any case, that's where the execution took place. And I remember when the area adjacent to the grounds where the execution took place was dedicated, I think in 1975 or 76, and my mom was asked to represent the family, the Little Crow family at that time, for the dedication. It's called Dakota Wokikse Makoche, Land of Dakota Memories. That's a park there. And so we all went there for that dedication.
So Little Crow was the chief leading the people at that time?
Yes, he did. He led the people on the path of peace, and then when everything turned over to war, unfortunately, he led the people at that time as well.
So can you tell us about how Little Crow was executed or killed?
Well, as a backdrop to that, the state of Minnesota put a bounty on the scalps of Dakota people. So they're...
After the Minnesota uprising?
Yeah, after the war. So then a large portion of the the Dakota people knew that they could obtain asylum in Canada. It's called Unchiapi Makoche, grandmother's land. In other words, Queen Victoria was very benevolent. And so then, because the Dakota people allied with the British during the Revolutionary War of 1812, they fled for asylum to grandmother's land, to Canada, and went to what's close to Winnipeg now, Fort Selkirk. And from there, they dispersed over and currently occupy several reserves in Saskatchewan and also in Manitoba to this day. And so there's a large, perhaps the majority of Dakota descendants currently reside in Canada. And so then Kaoyate Duta and his son were picking raspberries on July 3rd, 1863, near Hutchinson, Minnesota, when a man and his son encountered them, and knowing that there was a bounty that they could receive funds for, ended up shooting and killing Kaoyate Duta at that time. And they took his scalp, and he was later...
They scalped him?
Yeah, they scalped him, and he was later taken into that town, Hutchinson, Minnesota. His body was mutilated, he was decapitated, and so on and so forth.
What happened to his son?
His son escaped. Oh. His son escaped, but was later captured, and at that time explained who his father was. His son was named Woinapha. Woinapha was his name. And so he explains, so that's how it was discovered that the man killed was Kaoyate Duta.
What are your comments on this subject of your great-great-grandfather, Little Crow?
I think it's really tragic because he dedicated his life to obtaining justice for his people, the right to survive, the right to live in their God-given homelands, the land that the people had received and been the stewards and caretakers of, the beautiful Dakota homeland.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.